They wake up every day with a pulse but no presence, eyes open but not aware, breathing but not alive. They move through life like passengers on a train they didn't choose, staring out windows they've never tried to open, heading toward destinations they never questioned. Not because they're broken, not because they're lazy, but because they were conditioned, slowly, systematically, to forget. Forget the fire, forget the question, forget the storm that once lived in their chest. That question, the raw, aching, unrelenting, why am I here? Buried under to-do lists, promotions, approvals, and deadlines that never die. 95% of people aren't really living. They're sleepwalking through a masterpiece they were meant to create. And the tragedy isn't just that they're asleep, it's that they never knew they were allowed to wake up. You see, somewhere along the line, they were sold a map to success, a map to security, a map to being a good person, and they followed it without asking who drew it, why the roads twist where they do, why every exit looks like compromise. They wake up, not because they're ready to create, but because the alarm orders them to. They check their phone, not for purpose, but for programming. They chase money, not because they love what it brings, but because they fear what life looks like without it. Autopilot is the condition of forgetting your own divinity, of trading the fire in your chest for the warmth of predictable approval. It is not peace, it is sedation, and it begins in the mind. From the moment we are born, our minds are not nurtured. They are wired to obey, wired to repeat, wired to accept answers before we ever learned how to question. We are given names before we can speak, labels before we can understand. We're told what's real, what's possible, what's dangerous, what's polite, and the mind, the most powerful instrument in the known universe, becomes a filing cabinet for other people's blueprints, not a forge for creating our own. The education system isn't broken. It's designed that way, built to manufacture predictability, to crush the spirit of inquiry under the weight of standardized obedience. You weren't taught to think. You were trained to comply. Look around. The masses follow the script. Graduate, get the job, buy the house, lease the car, schedule the vacation, post the photo, numb the soul. And when the quiet ache rises in the middle of the night, that subtle whisper that says, "This isn't it," they silence it. With screens, with sugar, with sedation, with anything but silence, because silence is dangerous. Silence brings the questions back. Who am I? Why am I still here? Why does it all feel hollow? The truth? Most people aren't scared of failure. They're terrified of freedom, because freedom requires choice, and choice requires responsibility. And responsibility means if this life is miserable, you might be the one holding the match, so they'd rather sleep. The opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's conformity. And conformity, beautiful, easy, polished conformity, is the lifeblood of autopilot. Autopilot isn't a system error. It's the design of the system. But here's the paradox. No one can truly trap you if you remember how to think. Every extraordinary life began with a rupture, an internal rebellion, a moment where comfort was no longer enough, where the soul said, "No more, not like this." And from that spark, a revolution begins. But you must be willing to question everything, every rule, every truth, every voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like your mother, your teacher, your priest, your boss. Because until you do, you are not you. You are a carbon copy of the expectations around you. To break free of autopilot, the first war is internal, a war against the lie that the average life is noble, that dreaming big is dangerous, that obedience is virtue, that doubt is disloyalty. You are not here to be a gear in someone else's machine. You are here to build, to tear down, to reimagine. But you must reclaim the mind, hone it like a blade, sharpen it like a weapon. Because in a world that profits from your passivity, thinking for yourself is revolutionary. And in that awakening, the game changes. Once the mind is free, belief becomes the battleground. Because the mind can dream, but belief is what moves. What you believe shapes what you do, and what you do becomes who you are. But most people's beliefs are not forged, they are inherited. They were handed down, not chosen.
beliefs that suffering is noble, that wealth is wicked, that joy must be earned. They wear beliefs like chains and call it humility. They confuse endurance with destiny, and they mistake struggle for significance.
But belief is not meant to be inherited. It's meant to be engineered, constructed, layer by layer, by testing, by trial, by conscious choice. When you believe you are capable, you act like a creator. When you believe you are here on purpose, you stop waiting for permission. When you believe you are free, you stop playing roles in someone else's play. The masses live on autopilot because their beliefs are borrowed. But the awakened, they craft their creed like a warrior sharpens his sword. And in that sacred forge, the old world dies, and a new one begins. Because now, vision has room to grow. Not vision like a corporate mantra, not some Pinterest-worthy poster taped to a cubicle wall. Real vision is violent. It disrupts. It divides. It kills the version of you that settled for less. Vision is the scream of the future breaking through the skin of the present. It does not ask for comfort. It demands alignment. And if you don't feel it in your bones, like a compass screaming north while everyone else walks south, then it's not vision, it's decoration. This world is not lacking talent, it's drowning in noise. Vision is the only clarity strong enough to pierce the static. The masses drift because they see nothing worth bleeding for, but the awakened, they bleed by choice, because their vision is more real than their fears, and that's the beginning of purpose. Not a job title, not a charity, not a mission statement. Purpose is the engine that does not sleep. It is the force that burns through every excuse. It's not something you find, it's something you become, through every action that aligns with your truth. And the truth is, autopilot has no place in a life on fire. Purpose is not romantic. It's not comfortable. It's not a slogan to stitch onto your bio. It's violent clarity, the kind that burns bridges to mediocrity and leaves you standing in front of your own life, stripped of excuses, stripped of masks, face to face with what you're really made of. Purpose will make you a stranger to the crowd. It will demand solitude, not to punish you, but to purify you. Because once you know what you're here to do, the world no longer has the right to distract you. You won't care about being liked. You won't care about applause. You'll trade validation for truth, comfort for fire, noise for alignment. And in that furnace of solitude, something terrifying happens. You stop waiting. You stop hoping. You start becoming. Autopilot cannot survive in the same space as action. And I don't mean busy work. I don't mean running in circles and calling it a hustle. I mean deliberate movement, action that serves the architecture of your becoming. The masses act to escape silence. The awake act to create impact. Autopilot looks like productivity, but it's the illusion of motion, like a treadmill turned all the way up. Your heart is pounding, your body sweating, but you're not moving an inch closer to the life you want. You need direction, not speed. This is why the average man works 40 hours a week for 40 years and dies with his music still in him, because he confused motion for meaning. He thought discipline meant following orders, not building empires. Real discipline isn't about punishment, it's devotion. Devotion to a self that hasn't fully arrived but calls you forward like prophecy. A discipline so holy it doesn't need a crowd. A rhythm so sacred it doesn't need reward. Because in that discipline, the man who was asleep disappears. And the architect awakens. You stop negotiating with weakness. You stop bargaining with resistance. You stop asking for motivation like it's some divine permission slip. Because when you are possessed by purpose, you act whether or not the fire shows up. And when it doesn't, you become the fire. Discipline is the exorcism of the old self. It's the daily ritual that says, I will no longer bow to comfort. I will no longer kneel before my fears. I will no longer let the autopilot write my eulogy. And from discipline comes presence. And presence is where everything changes. Presence is not mindfulness. It is not the gentle act of paying attention. It is the raw possession of your moment. It is standing in the battlefield of your now and refusing to retreat into memory or fantasy. The reason most people never transform is because they are never here. They are ghosts. haunted by the past, addicted to the future, absent from the only place where power lives, the present. Autopilot is a refusal to be present. It's the dull agreement that tomorrow will be just like today, and that's okay. But presence, real, ruthless presence, obliterates that lie. Because when you really show up, you realize how little time you have, how sacred the breath is, how fragile the opportunity, and how precious it is to be aware, fully aware that you are still here, still able to choose, still able to move, still able to rewrite the ending. That's when gratitude becomes a weapon, not the soft, watered-down kind that makes you tolerate misery in the name of virtue, not the kind that says, be thankful you're not starving, as if suffering less than someone else is a measure of success. No. I'm talking about rage-fueled gratitude, the kind that wakes you up in the morning and screams, I'm still alive, I still have time, and I will not waste this breath. Because every second you are awake is a second the autopilot cannot control. Every breath is a rebellion. Every heartbeat is a drumbeat of war against apathy, conformity, and decay. And in that sacred gratitude, not for things, but for awareness itself, you discover adaptability. Because life will hit, storms will come, plans will burn, and you must decide. Bend or break. Autopilot can't adapt. It can only repeat. It keeps you circling the same pain, same patterns, same regrets. But the awake, they don't just survive change. They absorb it. They let it sharpen them. They let it forge something new. Because when you're truly awake, you don't fear chaos. You understand. Chaos is the training ground of creation. Adaptability isn't about compromise. It's about refinement. It's how you learn the rhythm of the storm without losing your voice in the thunder. And in that rhythm, that chaos, you become resilient. Not hard, not numb, not untouchable, unstoppable. Resilience isn't about hiding your wounds. It's about using them, about taking every betrayal, every loss, every failure, and transmuting it into fuel. It's about becoming the kind of soul that says, I see the wreckage, I feel the grief, but I still rise, not in spite of it, but because of it. Autopilot shuts down when the path gets dark. The awake ignite, because they've buried too many versions of themselves to turn back now, because they've seen what's on the other side of persistence, freedom, power, truth. And truth is where the final fire burns. The kind of truth you don't read, you become. But even truth means nothing if you stop learning. The ones who sleep believe they already know, but the awake are always dying and being reborn through knowledge. They don't cling to certainty. They hunt for growth. They want to be wrong if it means they'll become righter, and they understand the moment you stop learning, you stop evolving. And the moment you stop evolving, the autopilot wins. You weren't meant to be static. You were meant to be fluid, to die and rise again 1,000 times in one lifetime, to become unrecognizable to the version of yourself that once settled. The world doesn't need more minds asleep at the wheel. It needs awakened warriors, radicals of awareness, souls who've chosen consciousness over convenience, deliberate living over default existence. Not 5%, not the rare few, but an uprising. Because if you are still breathing, you have time to choose. And the question remains, will you live wide awake or die on autopilot? Then hear this, not as words, but as warning, not as inspiration, but as invocation. You were not sent here to mimic the sleepwalkers. You were not designed to spend your life grinding gears in someone else's machine, numbing your hunger, burying your questions, ignoring the throb of something deeper screaming beneath your ribs. No, you were built to awaken, to fracture the trance, to break the great lie that says, this is just how life is, to look the system in the eye and say, not for me. You were built to pull the wheel out of the autopilot's cold, mechanical hands and drive your life into the unknown, to rip the script from the culture's hand and write your own story in blood and fire. That's what it takes, nothing less. Because comfort will not release you, fear will not loosen its grip, The chains don't fall off just because you wish it. You have to fight for your mind. You have to bleed for your awareness. You have to die to the you that accepted a shallow life and rise as the you who demands a deeper one. Look around. Look closely. Most people are already gone, walking corpses with phones in their hands and dreams in their graves. Dead not because their hearts stopped, but because their choices did. Dead because they traded their soul for comfort. Dead because they were told they had time, and they believed it. But you are hearing this now, which means one thing. Your soul has not given up on you. It's banging on the walls. It's rattling your bones. It's screaming, "Wake up, wake up, wake up." This life is not a rehearsal. This breath is not alone. So what will you do with it? Return to the fog or walk through the fire? Hide behind routine or shatter it? Waste another decade in a prison with open doors or break free and build something eternal? That is the choice. That is the war. And now it is yours to win, because the clock is ticking and the autopilot is patient. But you have seen it now. You've felt the lie. You've tasted the truth. And once you taste it, you can never forget it. So rise. Rise with nothing but conviction in your chest and defiance in your spine. Rise, not as who you were, but as who you were meant to become. Rise, not because it's easy, but because it's the only thing left worth doing. And let them sleep. Let them call you crazy, arrogant, obsessed. Let them mock your solitude, your fire, your refusal to conform. Because one day they will wake up and realize they were asleep the whole time. And by then, you'll already be gone. Far beyond what they thought was possible. Far beyond average, imitation, hesitation. Living a life that autopilot could never touch. So go, take the wheel, burn the script, and drive like your soul depends on it. Because it does, it always has, and now you finally remember.